Hello everyone, back tuning into today's first video. So we're going to do part 2 of the summer 2016 analogues that James Acril, our good friend, sent through to us last week. We did the first analogues update last week in terms of April blocking and what it can mean for the summer. I'll talk you through everything that we discussed last week in a second, just very briefly. But if you want to watch the part 1 that we did last week, all you have to do is go to the Summer Updates page. It's still there and will remain there indefinitely. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, it's quite an interesting video. Do check it out on the Summer Updates page. I say this is part 2. We're going to have a look at some more analogues. There's also some very interesting spreadsheets that James has sent through, but I'll talk you through as well. So I'll get on that in a second. Later on, we're going to have Terry's mid-May to mid-June month-end forecast, so that'll be coming up at website later on this afternoon, and then towards this evening we'll be doing the first update for the late spring bank holiday weekend. So it's all going to be happening at Gavs Weathervids today. Before I get on with all of the updates though, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks very much for doing that. There's video ads on most of the pages. They open up content where you watch them and close back up again. It helps to pay for gavsweathervids.com. So thanks so much for getting involved, and thanks for doing that. As I want to review very quickly for anybody that didn't see last week's part 1 update, and then we'll have a look at some fresh information that James has sent through. So essentially what we was looking at last week was April blocking, because we had a very blocked April in 2016, and this is how the reanalysis looks when we look back at April 2016. We have all of this red up over Greenland, that's high pressure, and then the trough underneath it around Western Europe and the UK. A cool and fairly unsettled month as well. In fact, given the reanalysis anomaly chart that we see there, you would probably expect it to be colder and wetter than it was, but nevertheless it was a fairly cool and wet April, to say the least, especially in the last week when it turned really, really cold. So what we look back on is past years that had this kind of pattern in April, and we discovered that there's 17 years back to 1950 that has extensive northern blocking over the pole and over Greenland in the month of April. And we start, the first year is 1953, and the last year, most recent year before 2016, was 2012. And putting all of those 17 years together, what we discover is that this is how the reanalysis looks for those 17 years, with high pressure centred around Greenland and the pole, and then low pressure underneath it through the mid-latitudes and into the United Kingdom. That's a pretty good representation, actually, of how April 2016 turned out. So if we go back to April 2016, that was it. That was reanalysis for April 2016. And this is for 17 years. And you see that it's a perfect match, really, what happened in April 2016, perfect match for the previous 17 years. So we carried that forward and looked at what this could mean for the summer. So we started having a look at the reanalysis of all those 17 years from 1953 to 2012. This is how the Junes of all of those years come out. And we see that on average we have a trough of low pressure around Greenland and Iceland, and a ridge there through the Atlantic, and also centred over Scandinavia. So it tends to be quite a westerly signal for June, with the jet stream doing something like that. Perhaps the most settled month of the summer, we will see in a moment when we have a look at James's spreadsheets. But as we go through to July, look at this. This is what happens when you combine all of the 17 years that had that amount of northern blocking in April. This is how July turns out, and we tend to get a re-emergence of that northern blocking around Greenland and the North Pole. We tend to get this deep trough, anomalous trough, sitting to the east, across Central Europe, and into western parts of Europe as well. And that means that the flow tends to be quite cool from the north northwesterly type direction, and it's also quite an unsettled signal within that trough of low pressure. And August, look at this, this is how the 17 years combined look for August. And that's just as bad, really, because we tend to get the trough around the mid-latitudes. There it is. There's the trough of low pressure. And then we tend to get the ridge around Greenland extending up into the pole. That's proper northern blocking there, right over top of the pole. So, again, the jet stream travelling underneath that blocking, giving really quite a cool wet signal for August. When you combine all of those years, the full 17 of them that had extensive blocking in April, that's how the August on average, combining them all together, tends to come out. So if you add all of these years, the 17 years, and all of the summer months within those 17 years, this is the reanalysis of the summers of the full list of 17. So back to 1953, where we start, to 2012, where we finish. This is how the summers in all of those years tends to pan out. And you can see it's not a great signal, really. Trough of low pressure tends to be anomalously around western central parts of Europe, and then we tend to get this ridging up to the north and to the west of the country. That's blocking, and we tend to have the flow in from the north. Bearing in mind, June in these years tends to be more westerly, so this is very much down to what happens in July and August, really offsetting a bit what goes on in June. It is quite a stark signal there that we tend to get pretty poor summers when we have this kind of extensive blocking over the North Pole. But just how poor can these summers get? So James has sent through some spreadsheets, and we're going to start off first of all by looking at which months tend to be the coolest and which months tend to be the warmest, and then how that compares to the rolling 30-year average. So this chart is showing us the coolest months of all of those summers, the full 17. There's the list of them from 1953 down to 2012, and the warmest months within those 17 years. So you see that very often June tends to be the coolest of the summer months. In fact, there's only one out of the 17 where June isn't the coolest month, and it's this one just here, 1986. Other than that, we've got 16 years where June tends to come out the coolest month. So even though June tends to have less in the way of northern blocking, it still on average tends to come out as the coolest of the summer months, and that's probably purely just because of the fact that it's a rapidly warming season through the summer. So June very often is around 2 degrees, maybe a bit more, cooler than average, cooler than July and August on average, if you see what I mean. So June tends to be significantly cooler than July and August, just because of the fact that it's a rapidly warming time of the year. July's through these 17 are quite interesting. They're about evenly split, really, between the Julys that are the warmest of the summers, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then Julys that are around average, which are all of these years just here. And then August, which is over here, that on average tends to be the warmest of the summer months in these 17. You see there's many of them indicated by these orange coloured boxes just here. The one that deviates is 1986, interestingly enough. It's that year where June is not the coolest of the summer months in that summer, and actually August is. So that's a very unusual summer in 1986. You could say that's kind of an anomaly, really, compared to all of the other years. So despite the fact that we get this blocking tending to set up in July and August, despite that, June still tends to be the coolest of the summer months. August still tends to be the warmest of the summer months, because that doesn't tell you very much, because even if August is the warmest summer month, it could still be cooler than average. So maybe this chart just here is a little bit more enlightening. I'm going to close up a bit so you can see this perhaps in a bit more depth, and I'll just close up a little bit more. There we go. So this is telling us the rolling 30-year average of the summers. Remember, we're starting off in 1953, just here, and we're finishing down in 2012, which is just here. So compared to the rolling 30-year average, we see that actually many of these summers, despite the fact that June is tending to be the warmest, June is tending to be the coolest of these summer months, and August is tending to be the warmest, despite that, many of these years are still coming out cooler than average. So, for example, wherever we've got a blue box, we've got a cooler than average rolling average, if you see what I mean. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we can go down further to have a look at these two, 9 and 10. 10 of the 17 summers come out cooler than average if you use the rolling 30-year average. That leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that are warmer than average. So it's quite a stark difference. And of those 5 that are warmer than average, 3 of them, in fact it's 4 of them, are only slightly above average. So anomaly of 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. The big one that deviates is this one just here, plus 1.8, which is 1995. That is a very hot summer that we had in 1995. But other than that, it's about double the probability, I think, that will be cooler than average compared to being warmer than average if we look back through the 17 years that had extensive blocking in April. So what we're looking at with this chart that James has sent through is comparing through to the 81 to 2010 average, the most recent 30-year average. And again, we've got the central temperatures here for the summer months. So we've got June just here, July just here, and August just here, with the anomalies of those summer months next to them. So, for example, 1953 came out with a June Central England temperature of 14.4, which compared to the 81 to 2010 average comes out with an anomaly of just minus 0.1. So it's almost bang on average. But June 1956 came out with an CET of 13.1, which is significantly colder than average compared to 81 to 2010, an anomaly of minus 1.4, and so on as we go down through the list. And it's the same is true for July. What you'll notice when you look through these is that most of these summer months are coming out cooler than the 81 to 2010 average. So for June, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 months, 12 Junes, that are cooler than the 81 to 2010 average, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are warmer than the 81 to 2010 average. For July, it's even more stark. Look at this. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 Julys through those 17 years are cooler than the 81 to 2010 average, with just 3, 1, 2, and 3 that are warmer than the 81 to 2010 average. I mean, it's a similar story as we go through to August. Again, of the 17, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 August that are cooler than the 81 to 2010 average, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 August that are warmer than the 81 to 2010 average. So whilst this doesn't guarantee that we're going to get a cool summer, there is a chance. You can see that because there are months that are coming out warmer than average. While it doesn't guarantee that we're going to get a cool summer following this cool blocked April, we can see that the odds are stacked against having a warm summer, and they're stacked in favour of having a cooler than average summer. These are the summer CETs just here compared to 81 to 2010. Again, I'll just close in for you so that you can see them a little bit easier. There we go. Remember, we're starting in 1953 just here and ending in 2012 down here. And again, it's the same story as what we were just looking at, really comparing it to the rolling 30-year average, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and if we go down a bit, 14 with 2012, out of the 17 that are coming out cooler than average summers. And just one, 1995, that's coming out warmer than average. So that looks even more stark, although we have got these months within these summers, particularly I think in June, that do come out a little bit warmer than average at times. Despite all of that, generally the odds appear to be stacked in favour of having a pretty cool summer. What about rainfall? We can do the same idea for rainfall. James again has sent through this chart showing the driest and the wettest months, what they are on average through these 17 summers. So on average, you see that June is often coming out as the driest month. We saw from a reanalysis that in June you tend to get this ridge centred just to the west of the country, so that's the reason June on average through these 17 summers is coming out rather dry. There we are, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of the 17 Junes are coming out as the driest month of the summer, with 1, 2, and 3 Junes coming out as the wettest. And excuse me, if we move over into the July and August categories, you see July more often than not is coming out at the wettest of the summer months. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there that are coming out as the wettest of the summer months, with just one, 1999, that comes out as the driest. I mean, in August, same idea really, not quite as dramatic as July, but nevertheless August very often posts the wettest month of the summer. If July doesn't do it, then it looks like August tends to do it on average. So it does imply that when we get these blocked Aprils, we tend to get fairly cool summers. I think we demonstrated that. They very often come out below the 81 to 2010 average, and they very often tend to have drier conditions in June and then wetter conditions in either July or August. Tends to come out as the wettest month of those summers. If we scan in and have a look at the data for the summers as a whole, I've gone in a bit too far, there we go, pull back a bit. This is the anomalies that we see through the 17. So where we've got blue, we're below average with the rainfall. Where we've got green or red or orange, we're above average. So you see that very often these months are coming out a little bit wetter than average. Maybe not all that dramatically wet, but there's more of the orange and red and green boxes than there is the blue boxes there. So very often they're coming out quite unsettled, and they're coming out pretty cool as well. And in terms of the sunshine hours that James has sent through, again, June tends to have the most sunshine. So the orange boxes here showing us where we've got the sunniest of the summer months. The blue boxes telling us where we've got the dullest of the summer months. And again, we see that June very often gets the best sunshine out of these 17 summers, with just 2 that are coming out with the worst sunshine hours in June. Whereas July and August, it's much more of a mixed bag, and July particularly tends to get the dullest amount of, well, you can't have the dullest amount of sunshine, but it tends to be the worst in terms of sunshine hours in July, and sometimes that's true in August as well. So out of all of this, I think we can say quite definitively that when we get these very blocked Aprils, we tend to follow it through with pretty cool summers. I think we demonstrate that quite well. But we tend to get a bit of a split between those. It's not quite as straightforward as it at first appears, because June tends to be, whilst it tends to be the coolest of the summer months, it also tends to have the driest and sunniest of the conditions. Whereas July and August, just because of the fact that it's a warming time of year, and July and August are nearly always warmer than June, despite the fact that July and August tend to be the warmest months of the summer, but probably still cooler than average, we tend to get the least amount of sunshine in those 2 months, and we tend to get the wettest conditions as well, either July or August. So it's quite interesting, but it does demonstrate that overall these summers that follow blocked Aprils, they appear to have a pattern that is quite unsettled and quite cool as well. James also looked at the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. So again, we see that June tends to be the most positive with the Arctic Oscillation. Remember, the Arctic Oscillation is reflective of blocking in the atmosphere. So where we've got these yellow boxes for June, that's telling us that we're tending to have positive Arctic Oscillation. So not too much northern blocking in the month of June, but we get through to July and we see that we get a lot more blocking coming through in July, where we've got these blue boxes, and that very often continues into August as well. Not every year by any means is following this through. So for example, August 1995, 1996 and 1998 all have positive Arctic oscillations, but they are deviations, if you like, and we've got to deal with this in terms of the overall trend. And the overall trend is that we tend to have less in the way of blocking in June and more of it in July and August when we look at these 17 years. And the same is true, of course, for the North Atlantic Oscillation as well. June tends to be the most positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation, which tells us we've got a ridge around the Azores and low pressure around Iceland, whereas it's a much more of a mixed picture in July and August, and particularly July tends to be negative with the North Atlantic Oscillation. Many of these years coming out with negative numbers for the North Atlantic Oscillation, and that is true into August as well. So again, quite clearly we demonstrate that of the 17 years that have lots of northern blocking over the pole in April, it does appear to be a signal for cooler conditions in the summer, and particularly unsettled through the course of July and August. Now, of course, last month we did some more analogues. We looked at more analogues in April that were exploring the possibility of what happens when we go from El Nino to La Nina. And I sort of want to go back to the beginning as we come up to the end of this video. So we looked at those years where we had the transition from Nino to Nina through the summer, and we demonstrated again that is quite a signal for unsettled summer conditions. So out of these 17 years that had all of this blocking over the pole in April, and presumably many of them followed by cool summer conditions, how many of them were Nino to Nina years? I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at that. So James has sent through this spreadsheet, and we can see that actually there's probably more of these 17 that weren't transitioning from El Nino to La Nina, but there are years within these 17 that do transition from Nino to Nina. And we see that the years are particularly 1973, 1988, 1995, I'll talk about that in a second, 1998 and 2010. Those were the years through those 17 that had lots of blocking over the North Pole, that also had the transition from El Nino to La Nina. And we can see from this part of the chart how those years developed. So let's look at 1973, first of all, which is this one just here. You see there was a rapid transition to quite a strong La Nina through that year. So we started off in 1973 with a strong El Nino. By the time we got through to the summer months, which are these ones just here, the tri-monthly periods cover the summer, we see a very rapid drop in the temperature through there. And again, the same is true in 1998, where we have this rapid transition into La Nina through the course of the summer. Now, 1995 is interesting because whilst it is a year that transitions from El Nino to La Nina, it doesn't do it as quickly. So you see that in 1973 and in 1988, we're getting blue numbers appearing, which are negative numbers, telling us cold event is developing in this first summer tri-monthly period. That's not true for 1995. In fact, the first blue number doesn't appear in 1995 until the end of the summer, the last tri-monthly period of the summer of 1995, if you like. And even then, it's only very weak, La Nina. So that perhaps explains why La Nina was, why 1995 was a deviation, why it was a hot summer compared to the other summers that we've been exploring in these updates. 1995 was a hot summer, but it was a very slow transition from El Nino to La Nina. It's very weak La Nina as well. 1998 is much more in line with the trend, if you like, with a rapid transition into La Nina from El Nino. And again, we see it in 2010, the last time we did this rapid transition from El Nino to La Nina. This is how the reanalysis looks in terms of those years where we transition from El Nino to La Nina. This is August 1973. I can't show you all of the information that James sent through because I haven't got time. But this is how August 1973 looks reanalysed. And you see that it's quite a westerly month, a ridge down to the south, low pressure up to the north, with jet stream doing something like that. So it wasn't a disaster of the summer month, actually, in 1973. This is how August 1988 looks, though that was a terrible summer in 1988, and this is indicative of what happened in that summer, where we transitioned rapidly from Nino to Nina. 1995, the one that deviates, of course, because I think it's because it's a much slower transition from El Nino to La Nina, and it's also a weak transition as well, but we know it was a classic summer, lots and lots of high pressure centered right over the top of the country, really hot and dry summer, real drought summer, if you like. 1998, this is August 1998. It shows a ridge out to the west and a trough to the northeast, and the flow was going like that. But it wasn't a disaster of the summer in 1998. Really, it was an unsettled summer. It was quite a cool summer, but there was some useful dry weather, especially in the south. And then 2010, which is quite an interesting one, because 2010 was a front-loaded summer, so it was pretty good in June and early July, and there was a complete flip. And this is how August 2010 looks, with loads of blocking over and to the east of the UK, loads of troughiness, I should say, over and to the east of the UK, and all of this really, really extensive blocking centred over Greenland. Of course, we know what happened a few months after that, in December 2010, and very severely cold, of course, and with lots of northern blocking as well. Maybe this was even as early as August 2010, the beginnings of that pattern starting to set up with all of this high pressure up over the North Pole. And finally, James has also had a very quick look at years before 1950, because generally with these reanalysis charts we only go back to 1950, but James has also looked for years back to 1900 that did the flip from El Nino to La Nina, and it's the same story really, which tends to be the trough over the UK, blocking up to the north, particularly centred around Green. We've only got 3 years that we can look at with this, 1903, 1924 and 1942, years back, summers I should say, that transition from El Nino to La Nina. But out of the 3, it looks like it continues the idea that we have in the second half of the 20th century. We've got many more years to go at, which is that it tends to be a signal for unsettled summers. So putting it all together, I think we've got from the analogues a pretty good idea that we're probably in line for a poor summer. Of course, it's not as straightforward as that, because we've got years that deviate, particularly 1995, and what we don't know is whether we're going to get this transition from El Nino to La Nina. We've got to do more work on that over the next couple of weeks to see, are we going to get this transition from El Nino to La Nina, or are we just going to go from El Nino to ENSO neutral? It's going to be critical, I think. But if we assume that we get the transition from Nino to Nina, and we combine that with the blocking that we've had in April over the North Pole, it looks like the analogues pretty much favour a poor summer, with probably not too bad conditions in June, although June likely to be the coolest of the summer month, but only because it's a warming season. But June probably having the driest weather and probably having the sunniest conditions, and then July and August tend to be favouring, whether we're looking at the transition from Nino to Nina, or whether we're looking at the April blocking idea, or combining everything together, if you like. It looks like August and July tend to be the wettest and dullest of the summer months, albeit warmer than June, but again, just because it's a warming time of year, and despite being warmer than June, very often I think they're coming out cooler than average. So the analogues don't imply a particularly good summer, but we have got years that are deviating. We might get a deviation in 2016, and the crucial factor, and we still don't know it yet, will we get this flip from El Nino to La Nina? And if we don't, then we could come out with a very different summer idea. Right, hope you've enjoyed the 2 analogue updates. As I say, I struggle with this a little bit, so I hope you've been able to follow the story as we've gone along over the 2 updates. If I've got anything wrong, it's entirely my fault. It's not James's fault. James has done all of this tremendous work, and I may have got it wrong presenting it, but I've done the best that I can. Right, next week we're going to have a look at the models for one last time for this summer. We'll get all the long-range models together, as many of them as we can. And then the week after that, so 2 weeks today, we will do the GasWeathers.com summer forecast, where we'll put all of these analogues together with the models, and we'll come up with a forecast for the summer of 2016, or we'll try to anyway. Right, how long have I gone on for? I've gone on over half an hour with this update. It's been a very, very long update. Sorry for going on so long, but hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. This video will be kept on the summer updates page indefinitely, and you'll be able to come back and watch it whenever you want. There'll also be a written summary that goes with this update later on this afternoon, posted on the summer updates page. I think I've said enough, so that's all for now. And thanks for watching. Come back later for Terry's month-end forecast, and also this evening for the late spring bank holiday update, the first one of those. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.